Working in prisons, what made you, I mean, you know, teaching and everything. What do you teach and like what made you?
Before you answer that, because
Okay, go
I
ahead, my bad.
want to, you kind of introduced me to that. Where I remember getting a call from you one day and you were like, yo, you know, I do this program for, you know, kids that get in trouble, and rather than go to prison or juvenile detention center, they have to do this program. Would you like to come through and speak? And I was like, yeah, cool. And I met up with you that day and we went there and you asked me if I wanted to go first, and I regret not going first because this is a hard act to follow, as you can tell, you know what I mean? And I remember you started speaking to these kids, you know, about values and what society would like them to believe is important, what they spend their money on, what they gravitate to, but what is the actual butter. There's guns and guns and butter. It was kind of like a guns and butter kind of conversation. And I remember you saying to them, look at me, like a fucking bum, don't I? Well, check this out. And you went in your pocket and you pulled out so much money and just dropped it on the table. And I said to myself, I only got $300. How am I gonna compete with this? You know what I'm saying? What am I gonna say after this? But I remember how powerful that program was, and meeting one of the kids years later and finding out he was into music, he has his own group, and he was like, yo, you don't remember you came to the program, you and Immortal spoke that day. And I was like, oh, wow. And he's like, yeah, we got a group, we over here, we moving the CDs. And I'm like, yo, that's dope. And I went on to do the same thing upstate New York. But I always wanted to thank you for introducing me to that. That was dope. How do you feel? Because I'm sure it's about, you've been doing this for like 8, 9 years strong?
On and off, almost 10 years, yeah.
10 years.
I was incarcerated when I was really young. And I'm gonna be honest with you, one of the hardest things about being locked up is I'm a person who likes to help other people. So if I see somebody in the street getting jumped, I'm gonna be like, yo, what the fuck y'all doing? Like, obviously I'm not stupid, I'm not gonna run in and get ice picked in the gun.
Right,
But
exactly.
I'm gonna be like, yo, what the fuck is this? The first weapon is your voice.
Right.
Man, woman, everyone should know that. Somebody pulls out a gun, what the fuck you got a gun for? That's not dry snitching. You helping the people behind you and the mother get her child the fuck out the fucking bodega before some kid gets killed.
Right.
So I'm a person who likes to help people. But I'm gonna just tell people who have never been incarcerated, you can forget that. Because when you see someone else getting jumped by 5 people, that ain't none of your fucking business.
Right.
You can't mind someone else's business. Because guess what? If you jump in, now you got beef with 5 other random Bloods, Crips, Latin King, people you didn't even know. And here's the other problem. You don't know what this person did. Did they rape somebody? Did they steal from someone on the inside?
Right.
And here's what the hardest thing the OG told me. He goes, even if he didn't, even if he's fighting off being victimized, that still ain't none of your fucking business. And I've definitely been in situations where I've seen motherfuckers just beating someone like an animal and doing crazy shit, and I've just been like,
Yeah, I look
and been like, you know, and it hurts to be that way because I'm a person, like I said, who likes to do things. So I thought to myself, one day I had enough, and I heard some dudes and they were scheming on a kid in the shop. They were like, oh, we're gonna get this dude. And I rolled up there. I called my homie who was, you know, people roll and split themselves up by race in prison, but they're all united by class. Because if any of them had a $10 million lawyer, they wouldn't fucking be there. Which always begs the question from the smartest kid in the class, what happens when there's a millionaire in jail? And I say, he's the guiltiest nigga there because he had the $1 million lawyer and he still couldn't get the fuck off.
Right.
But people do divide themselves.
Right.
But it was rare because I stepped out the group of Ricans and I went over to a dude that I knew who I was just cool with, who was blood, and I was like, yo man, they about to violate this little kid and that shit ain't right, and I had enough today. And I went over there and he came with me and I said, nah, y'all niggas don't get to decide this. Now fuck you. And that day I think I just, whatever. So I didn't become nobody's OG, nobody's big homie, but I would just tell people like, yo man, shut up if they were talking too much about things they shouldn't be. Or I would just, I guess I grew older that day because I was like, you know what? Let me just make sure that everybody don't fall in the same fucking hole.
I do kind of have a say so.
And I got to a point where I said, I can help other people not make the same mistakes I've made. I can show people the greatest tool of teaching, which is show people, have the humility to show people your personal failure. Like I always remind people, if the big homies on the block are just talking about all the bitches they fucked and all the money they make and all the things they did right, then they're not teaching you anything. They're just bragging to you. Right. And you a sucker for listening. A person who really teaches you tells you, this is how I broke my own heart. This is how I pushed someone away that was trying to love me and I couldn't accept it because I was hurt and because someone did horrible things to me when I was a kid. This is when I fucking screwed up a job because I was trying to put other niggas on rather than get my situation right. And I let somebody else getting hired fuck me out of a job. Please don't do that. I loaned $10,000 to my brother and then I realized that you don't loan family money. You give it to them and there ain't no fucking people giving it back.
Right.
You get lessons of the day. And it was like, cool. I had already had some of those life lessons from my master. So I was born in Harlem. I learned to hustle, all these things. But one thing I realized, that I met a lot of people, whether they black, white, Asian, Latino, they were born hustlers, right? Born hustlers. But I never met a person, any race, religion, that was born knowing how to invest. No one's ever born knowing the stock market or knowing real estate. They have to be taught these things. No one's born knowing the alphabet. You learn it not through a numerical scale, through a musical scale. Everything revolves around music. So what I tell people is when you're absorbing these things, I said to myself, can I stop somebody from falling in? If I stop one person from falling in. So whenever I went to the classes, the way I would captivate people is by teaching them from my failures. I would say, yes, my parents saved up to send me to college from the moment we moved to America. I was one of them kids that got into a really good school and then I started doing stupid shit. And I ended up in prison and my parents spent all the money that they had saved for me. And they spent it on a lawyer so I wouldn't go to jail for 10 years like my fucking idiot co-defendant. And I didn't rat on nobody. And I took my fucking lick like a man. And then when they told me I could get out and they said all I had to do was sign a piece of paper, I turned the paper down and I had to see my mom crying and behind the glass and say, well, why can't you just come home? And I said, because Mom, they want me to sign this piece of paper that names other people. And then they'll always keep a piece of me here, Mom, always. And I can't do that. And she's like, well, fuck that. It's not about the world, Mom, it's about me. So like I learned these harsh lessons as a kid. I learned what it was like to not have human contact, to be thrown in a hole for 60 days, and then to be thrown in a hole again another 45. For what? I didn't do anything. What the fuck y'all doing to me? And then when I finally began to start like opening myself up to talk to these kids, I realized that, man, they had been through things that I couldn't even imagine. And I realized that the so-called super predators, these scary black and Latino kids, these scary poor white kids, man, all of them were just people who had been physically abused as kids or sexually abused or hurt. And they were doing what they did as a defense mechanism to keep people away from them. You realize, why do people in prison hate pedophiles so much? And here's part of this, the reason is that they feel like they're never gonna get out and someone else hurt a child and they never hold theirs. The other one that they don't like to mention and that people don't talk about is that a lot of people in there have been hurt as kids. And they feel like because that person did something to them, somehow they missed their destiny. It put them on an altered course. I wasn't supposed to be this murderer, this killer. I wasn't supposed to be this angry, hateful person. I was supposed to be a lawyer. I was supposed to be a doctor. I was supposed to be a counselor. I was supposed to be a teacher, a principal. I was supposed to do something. I wasn't supposed to be eating out of this and drinking out of the same water where I pissed. Like, the fuck, what am I doing here? And then you see a person that has that frivolous attitude towards people and they get extremely violent. And what happens is that in prison, they practice what we call selective morality. So everybody could be sitting at this table, and if you a murderer and you a bank robber, and you a thief, everyone's cool. But rapists and pedophiles are not allowed. And that was a very jarring thing that I saw. Like, people would just be in other people's food, like, excuse me, you done? And they'd be like, now you have to be PC'd up. No, now you know you have a target on you. But I think the biggest thing that hurt me was when I saw children that have sexually abused other children. And at that point, you're thinking in your head, a 13-year-old, why would a 13-year-old touch a 10-year-old? Like, what are they doing? And then you realize, well, that 13-year-old's been touched since he was 5. Like, he's almost repeating behavior. Like, but at some point, then you have this scale where it says, Well, at some point, you have to accept the responsibility of your action as an adult. But at what point does that come for an abused child? Like an ex-girlfriend of mine used to work in New York prison system where she was taking care of kids that had been arrested for prostitution. And
That's tough.
She's like, here's the problem.
I dated a CO that was around
telling
stuff
me
like that.
most of these kids have been trafficked and stolen from the time they were little. Why are they the ones in jail? Like, they're a victim of being trafficked. I just did a TV show on Manhattan Neighborhood Network about trafficking, and specifically with an officer named Manny Gomez, who goes around and finds people that are trafficked, because he says that the system pays less attention to Black and Latino women that have been trafficked, and also that now when you over 18, like I said, you don't stop being someone's daughter or someone's son, but the epic is not to take a child anymore. They will take a grown-ass adult, a 20, 30-year-old person, and shoot you full of heroin between the toes, get you addicted, and before you know it, in 2 weeks, you don't know where you are, and you're being trafficked in another state. And it's like, well, what the fuck? This is the same pain and misery these people are going through. And if I can't be empathetic to pain and suffering and that kind of thing, then, you know what I mean? There's not redemption for them. There's not redemption for anybody. Right?
So was it your idea to say, well, let me catch them early? Let me do these programs. Let me speak to these kids and just catch them early.
Well, I felt like they were more impressionable, obviously, at that age, but also I think that the system, when you're a child, is slightly more reformatory. In other words, they have all the classes for math, for science. I wasn't teaching math or science. To his question, I taught a program called Confronting Trauma Through Writing. So we would make children write about no names, change to protect the innocent. Just write a story about something. And some of them would write crazy stories. You know, Jamal, older brother, shot someone, but he has 2 felonies and Jamal is 10. So he gave Jamal a gun. And Jamal held the gun and he went to juvenile hall for 8 months, and now he's home and his brother's free. But then his brother died like a month or 2 later.
While he was in.
Right. So it's like, God damn it. Like what? Like these are sad stories, but at the same time, they come in from the imagination of a child who's either seen that or been a part of it. Right. And mind you, even if it hasn't happened to you, but it happened in your building, you can't
you're
not
still
have
affected somehow.
You can't not have PTSD because of that as a child. PTSD isn't just for Iraq war veterans. You know what I mean? It's for people who undergo horrific trauma. Like, will you live in a practical war zone, or you live without the comfortable idea of when you're gonna get your next meal or when things are gonna, then it's obviously gonna be like that. And I feel like that's an interesting factor that we have in hip hop, because if you come from poverty, people consider you to be more real. But nobody that's ever been poor will tell you that shit was real. They'll tell you that shit was fucked up.
Tough.
Right.
Is there anybody that you actually, you know, visited or you was helped mentor that came home and, you know, got on their feet and like was reformed or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, a few people were part of the prison program. We were talking about my friend China Mac. He was part of the prison program when he first was paroled. And it was definitely, he learned.
Shout out to China Mac.
Shout out to China Mac. He learned a little bit about the music business through me, and then he went on to do his own thing. There were several people that didn't have a career in music, but they went on to get a stable job. And, you know, unfortunately, there are some people that went back because I think one of the other heartbreaking parts, and I appreciate you bringing this up, is that when you look at the bail system, bro, I could have bailed all these kids out. The bails were like $800.
Yeah.
But I would have to become the primary caregiver and the guardian.
Kind of like what Meek Mill was fighting with the whole prison reform.
If I wanted to, all of them could have got out.
That's crazy.
And the other part of it is this whole idea of the absence or the mythology, because I say we have to, there's a lot of false narratives in the Black and Latino community, this idea of absentee Black fathers, absentee Latino fathers. I'm not saying that there aren't absentee fathers, but when I went and visited and seen a lot of people that are incarcerated, they're not just missing a father. They're missing a father, a mom. They're handed off to some relative in many cases, or a friend of the family, or grandma. So it's not like they're missing a dad. They're missing an entire family structure. Or they have a father and they're missing a mom. But somehow the family structure is restricted in some way from having more people that are there. And one thing that I think is also missing is when you don't have a generational line of people that are in the family, then there's no one to trickle down knowledge and information.
Right.
For example, we were discussing Malcolm X and what his role would be as an adult to us. Well, then we have to question. We talk about black and brown fathers just now. What about black and brown grandfathers? Who teaches the father how to be a father?
Right.
Who teaches the father, hey, at some point, you're gonna hit this kid. And it's not because he did something incredibly wrong. It's because you lack the patience to deal with it because you're 28 years old. And it doesn't make you the worst person in the world. But you're gonna have to accept this idea of you apologizing to your child for doing something wrong.
Right.
Because when I hit you back in 1977 and punched you in the face, that was wrong. And I did wrong, and I did some fucked up shit. And I was going through post-traumatic stress from being back from Vietnam and fighting in a war that I should never been. Just having an honest conversation.
Exactly.
Where's that generationalness amongst our people? And I think when that's missing, then you don't see knowledge passed down, and it becomes no respect for elders. Fuck those old people. They're fucking dead anyway. Without realizing, man, you be blessed to be their age. Because most of y'all, you don't know when tomorrow is. None of y'all ain't gonna make it past 28, 29. Some of y'all ain't gonna make it past 19.
Yeah.
And it's like, you be blessed. You making fun of old people. You be blessed to live 40, 50 years.
How does this cycle keep being perpetuated?
Well, I think it's because you have very few conversations about what actually causes it. And people are always trying to treat the symptoms and not the disease itself, right? So they try to treat the symptoms. The symptoms are gang violence, prostitution. These are all the symptoms of poverty and inequality of wealth, right? Even a police system, a police system, what it is, it said it on the Dead Prez album, it's true. A police system only exists when there's a massive gap between wealth. Otherwise, you don't need that, When there exists a giant gap between people who have and don't have, then you need to implement a ratio of control in the room.
Yep. Somebody to force you from getting out of line.
Somebody has to be in there, because otherwise people would say, economics, and people get upset, but it's just true. You can quantify it in very brutal ways. Like capitalism, imagine if you needed 3 logs to keep your family warm all summer. 3 logs, just to survive. Otherwise, you're gonna freeze to death. And in my warehouse, I have billions of logs. I could give you 3 so your family won't, because they're just logs. They don't mean anything to me. I'm not gonna miss any of them.
Right.
But you're gonna freeze, and so are all your kids, and they're all gonna die. And I don't give a fuck. And all the logs are mine, and it doesn't matter. Now, when I say it that way, the person who holds the logs sounds like a monster, like the worst person in the world, but that's the smiling guy on TV who you're voting for.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the asshole who's the president.
It's the billionaires
That's the
walking
billionaire
around.
class who exists. I
Yeah.
don't care that you don't have enough money to
Basically.
live. As long as I can get some more numbers in this imaginary video game that doesn't even exist.
Yep.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
Countries will starve.
Now, this has been a message
Right.
from you for like a decade.
Right. You would think they would have got it by now. Right?
Like a decade.
It's Hoffa, trapper turned smack rapper. Only smack rapper that you know is smack rappers. Got bars, I can hang with the backpackers. Trap star, I don't hang with the backpackers. I'm in the hood with the work, you heard. Making fiends leave earth, you heard. Got your baby mama thirst, you heard. Feel the flow, nigga, throw it in reverse. This the wave you need to surf, you heard. Told Jim I need a bomb I could drop on you niggas. Bad boy, I'm never gonna stop for you niggas. I don't give a fuck who you got as the illest. I solidify my spot with gorillas. Now I'm rock with you niggas.